I guess I'll dive right into what happened and not bore you with the unimportant details. I was hiking on a trail I'm very familiar with, and because of the changes in the weather, I decided to leave the trail and cut through the woods. I wanted to try and get to my car before a downpour, and I knew this area like the back of my hand. Before I knew it, I felt very disorientated and nothing appears familiar. I'm not too sure if the woods seemed silent before or after I felt this way, but I become undeniably aware of how silent everything is. A pressingly downright suffocating silence, and my heart began to pound as I stood in place, and it felt as though the woods were spinning and closing around me. It was like I'd stepped into something that I could not comprehend. It was then I noticed something about 15 feet in front of me. It was 10 feet high and about 8 foot wide and distorted. It was like something was bending the light and moving towards me, like a fogged up mirror almost, but with no definitive shape. But it was moving with purpose and intelligence, and would be completely unnoticeable if not for the distortion within and me directly looking at it. I turned to run and realized another's behind me, the same size and shape. Almost then I realized that there's at least 4 of these things closing in around me and I'm trapped. What I was seeing my brain cannot make sense of, and I'm in utter panic, shocked and back up against a tree, terrified to run in the direction of those things. I curl up into the fetal position, pull my hands over my ears. They had begun ringing and the sound was deafening. I closed my eyes as these intelligent looking cloaked things were all around me, about 5 feet in height. I saw a white flash, like what happens if you ever hit the ground really hard. That's the best way I can describe it. My ears were ringing. The flash, then nothing. I woke up to rain falling on me. Hours had passed. Everything looks normal, and I knew where I was. I gathered myself, checked for injuries, and realized that, weirdly, I'm completely fine. I drove home. I can't make sense of what happened. I've googled similar events but found nothing quite like what happened to me. I have no history of mental illness or other things that could have caused this. I've stumbled across stealth cloaking technologies used by the military, and the technology is primitive compared to what I witnessed. I just don't have the answers, and I don't know what happened to me or why. I've never had anything like it since. I just hate this. I'm definitely going to be seeing a doctor tomorrow. I have no history of seizures or other health issues. I'm in my 20s and fit and sound of mind, but I'd rather be safe than sorry. And now this happened in Ireland, and I was in the Midlands, so I'd rather not be too specific. So my story isn't recent, but I needed to share this. I'm 19 now, but this took place when I was 12. It's something that's always stuck in my mind. The night this encounter happened, everything was pretty normal. I was going back to school the next morning after summer break, so I had to be in bed earlier than I wanted to be. I remember falling asleep to the movie Meet the Robinsons, playing at probably 10:30 p.m. And then I woke up, and I knew it had to be late. But the first thing that I registered was that the TV is completely scrambled. I mean, almost like a DVD that doesn't play so it skips. But it was frozen, so the image was warped and boxy. Except the Meet the Robinsons DVD was fine. At this point, I guess it's around 2 or 3 a.m. The second thing I registered was that there's voices coming from the kitchen. I got out of bed to see what was going on because the voices are talking really loud and sound panicky. When I got to the kitchen, I realised that it was my mum and older sister arguing. The first thing I actually picked up on and comprehended was my mum saying, "Those are definitely aliens, what else could they be?" Almost sounding hysterical. Neither of them saw me enter the kitchen, but I asked what's going on, and my mum looked at me, and I knew she's scared and shaken. She literally had tears in her eyes. She told me in an almost sad voice that aliens were outside. At this point, we're all standing in the kitchen in front of our sliding glass door that looks across the yard. There's a field there. I was confused, so she pulled back the curtain to the kitchen door, and I don't see anything initially. I don't look hard enough. But I then saw my huge dog, German Shepherd and Great Dane mix, sitting in the middle of the yard in the direction of the neighbours, which was to my house on the right side. I asked my mum why he isn't sitting on the porch like normal and why he's so still. To that she said, "You can slide the door very slowly, but don't make too much noise." And usually when the door to the house is open, my dog looks towards it and runs in, but he doesn't. He's still gazing. I didn't realise what was going on, but I was scared because my mum was clearly scared, as my older sister is too. My mum signalled to my sister and I to be quiet, and we were. On a normal night, you can hear animals in the woods, or the trees in the wind, and crickets chirping because it was summer, but that night, we can't hear anything. It's completely silent outside, not even a breeze. This gives me chills that makes me shake. Something's terribly off. My mum shut the door, and my sister and I followed her to the bedroom where my dad was asleep and the windows open. She explains what's going on. She told me that my sister is in my room looking for something and peeks out my window. My room is in the back of the house and my window looks out to the trees behind the house. She saw what she thought was a pack of coyotes, but there's 30 of them, and the closer she looks, she starts to see distinguishable features, and that's when she dipped out of the room and told my mum. But before she could get there, my mum said that she walked outside before my sister came to say what she saw, and saw a tall, dark, slender figure walking down the neighbour's driveway towards our house. She thought it was the neighbour coming over for some reason, but then she suddenly got scared and felt it's best to pretend she's asleep so she wouldn't have to talk to the neighbour. And those events lead us to go into the kitchen window that overlooks the neighbours' houses right next to each other. It's dark. I'm looking very hard and I can see shadowy figures. Most of them are small and very quick, so fast that if you weren't paying attention you wouldn't have noticed, and if you paid even more, you could see the slower, taller ones. They move slow and the silhouettes are dark, darker than their background, almost fluid looking. It doesn't look real at all. And this sucks, but we didn't even think about grabbing a camera and trying to get pictures, which is something I regret. Another thing I noticed that's worth mentioning was that behind the neighbour's house they had woods too. Well within the trees and very low to the ground, there were 3 evenly spaced out lights. One was green, one was red, and another's bluish. The lights were pretty dim. They were never there before though. We watched out the window for about 10 minutes freaking out. My mum almost wheezing because she's so scared. After that, she took us into her room and opened the window more, which I didn't like. It made me more scared. She says be quiet, and since we couldn't hear anything at all coming from outside, we sit in silence until we heard what sounded like a car passing. And we hear the engine sound, but we can just about make out the road from my mum's window, and we see no cars, no headlights, nothing. The engine buzz was loud and turned into something like a plane passing over the house. This lasts for about a minute. Then it's completely silent again. After a few minutes, the sound would repeat. Eventually, after all this happened, my mum shut the window and the curtains and we sat there shaking. Another thing to point out was that I did eventually work up the courage to go back to my room, but that was a few hours later and it was getting light out. The TV scrambled, so I checked the disc and it's not working, so I ended up unplugging the DVD player to get it off the screen. That's about all that happened that night, but it freaked me out so bad that it makes me cry thinking of it. Not to mention that I wasn't the only one that saw it. I hate that I even witnessed this at such a young age. It was truly horrifying. A lot of you wanted to know my cousin's story on the skinwalker, but I'm going to try and get to the actual story from him tomorrow and fill you in there. I do have another one though that I'd like to share, however. This one doesn't have anything to do with skinwalkers, at least I don't think so. There was an old legend about a lost town in the forest near where I lived, and for the most part, it was only a legend. However, it was noted as being true, and a ghost town is near my town. The story that I'm about to tell is one that happened when I was 11, and still scares me to this day. My dad likes to take me on the little off-road rides in his Jeep. It wasn't necessarily an off-road one either. It was a Cherokee, so it wasn't really built for the backwoods dirt trails. He decides to do this and go throughout a park with me and told me that it's going to be fun and we could go and check out the ruins of an old building. We decided along the way that we're going to have a real good exploration here. There was one of those official vehicles only gates on this dirt road we come up to, and usually that would stop people, but my dad just decides to break the lock and push it open anyways. My father was ever the best to listening to rules, but sometimes he had to break them. About 30 minutes into our drive on this road, he's shining a flashlight out of the window, trying to find this building, and he has his headlights on full. We're both looking for signs of, well, anything. Eventually we come upon this really steep hill. He says, "Oh, I think I remember this," and just guns it up there. Naturally, we get stuck at a certain angle. We can't reverse or accelerate. My dad never likes to admit when he's wrong, and said he can fix it, and started thinking that he's going to be able to fix this really easily. I was very curious, and I still am, and I got the flashlight and started looking into the woods around us. I'm kind of worried about bears or wolves, to be honest. I then noticed a little light in the valley below us, and turned off the flashlight to see it. At the same time, my dad's cursing at our car, and I decided to get a little closer to the light and see if I can figure out what it was. Mainly to see if there was somebody who could help us. As I got closer to it, the trees took it apart a little bit, and I can see there's a very small town. The best way I can describe it is like a town from the movie Big Fish. Just very numbered set of buildings. As I got closer, I heard voices, and I saw people, but something just seemed really weird, like they weren't really there. I decided to try and get closer to the town, but the closer I get, the more weirded out I feel. I eventually felt if I didn't turn around, I would never come back, which is very odd, and I've never had this feeling before. I decided to turn around and go back to my dad. He didn't get the car unstuck by himself, at least, and we just slept in the car. The following morning, the park ranger showed up, and after a lengthy talk with my dad and a very hefty ticket, he helps us get the car unstuck and be on our way. Before we left, I try and catch another glimpse of the village, and it was the ruins that my dad was talking about. I talked to the park ranger about it and he said, well, this was once a thriving village, just lost in time. I decided not to say anything about what I saw to the park ranger, but did tell my dad, but his usual skepticism turned me away. I have visited since, and it's a pretty decent place, and I told my friends about what I saw, and they believed me for the most part, and we decided to stay out one night to try and find it and see if anything happened, but of course nothing did. But I still remember that night as if it was yesterday, and I still get goosebumps thinking of it. I went hiking with one of my old friends. He used to be homeless and in a bad situation with his parents, so I let him stay with me until he got back on his feet. One evening, before he officially started staying, we went one day into the woods to get his stuff from an area that he was posted up at during the night. It's probably 11 PM when we meet up. I got off work late. We go to the woods to pick up his stuff and we kind of get lost in the dark. It was abnormally dark considering the full moon was fixing to come around from its phase. Neither of us have flashlights and my phone had died, so I can't use it. Bad planning, I'll admit that. We stumble across a bunch of decently large moulds of dirt in the offshoots of the woods. Each mound had a small tree growing from the middle and a crude blank sign at the tops. But at this point it's eerily quiet, considering we're very close to the deepest part of the woods where there should be lots of sounds. We eventually found his campsite and hurried out. Outside of the woods now, we're walking down a one-way street leading to the main road. A large moving truck comes our way and slows and passes by us. We pay no mind to it and just nod and keep going. The truck turns around and pulls into a little offshoot, stopping parallel to us with the engine on. The driver gets out and watches us. We weren't being conspicuous or anything by looking back, just glancing over the shoulder here and there. Nothing you can make out in the darkness from the distance has anyhow. We're almost at the top of the street, and we're near my car when he goes back in his truck and I guess opens the back door. The next thing we hear is 3 large dogs barking their heads off and a flashlight pointing our way. We started running and had to do some evading through neighbourhood streets before we could get back. Nothing ever come of it. No cops, no local town chatter, nothing. I still have no idea what we ran across, but I knew we shouldn't have been there. I have a horrible feeling that this could have ended a lot worse for us. So this happened about 15 years ago to my brother and me, and I still can't come up with a satisfactory logical answer to our experience. For detail, this happened in Ontario, Canada, and we were 8 and 5 at the time. It's in a suburban area, built around a medium-sized forest, and our house backs onto the woods. We were driving home with our mum, and we were arguing. She told us to get out and walk the rest of the way. She dropped us off in front of the woods at the playground. There's a connected public path leading back up through the woods to our street. It's about a 5-minute walk away, and a small hill between the playground and the main road. We weren't pleased that we got in trouble, so we made up quickly and start playing on the sliding swings. My brother goes up and says, "Hey, who are those guys?" I look over and saw 2 men dressed in black suits, white shirts and black sunglasses coming over the top of the hill towards us. They're walking briskly and purposely in our direction. They had brown hair, not close cropped but short and fairly pale skin. It's beyond bizarre. It scared me immediately. I told my brother to come down the slide and we have to go home. They had already unnerved him enough that he actually listened to me. We started down the path, and when I look over my shoulder, they're still coming towards us quickly. That was horrifying, so I start to walk even faster, holding my brother's hand. Maybe 30 seconds later, I looked behind me again, and they've started running. They're gaining on us. That pushes us over the edge, and I scream at my brother to run home as fast as he can. I know he's quicker than me. I think he's going to be able to tell my parents if we're going to be kidnapped. I have honestly never ran so fast in my life, and we didn't look behind us again until we made it home. Our parents were still unloading the groceries and were surprised. They figured out that we had spoken to someone, and they couldn't really understand exactly what happened as the men never said a word. They're accompanied by a wall of silence. Neither of us have ever experienced anything like it again, and it wasn't until a year later that I watched the BuzzFeed Unsolved episode about Men in Black that I realised what I had encountered.